Good afternoon, everyone. This is Alvi. I'll be presenting about Chapter 7, Critical Theory and Emancipatory Knowing from the Butson Bridge text. Learning objectives could be found on page 146. Three main objectives, basically: to gain an overview of the fundamental patterns of knowing in nursing. Number 2, to understand underlying philosophy and theory on which emancipatory knowing is based. And number 3, to understand the necessity of emancipatory knowing approaches which will help achieve the essential competencies for advanced nursing practice. Emancipatory knowing. What is this? So this is covered in pages 143 to 145, and I have to be honest and say that I didn't know this initially, and I had to dive into the book to fully understand what it means. It's a pattern of knowing that has conceptual roots in critical social theory and practice. It's a human capacity to be aware of and critically reflect on the social, cultural, and political status quo, and to figure out how and why it came to be that way. It's a central, critical, and necessary pattern of knowing that underpins the development of all nursing knowledge and that shapes all nursing practices that flow from nursing's disciplinary knowledge. And it's a nursing practice that's grounded in awareness of social and political factors that create injustices in health and well-being, and that takes action to address these social structures in order to improve health and well-being of all people. So it's beyond what you see in front of you, beyond the patient. It's looking at how and why it came to be that way. And what does that look like? I'm a visual learner, so I went ahead and tried to illustrate this as best as I can so you all could understand. But let's use the example of opening a community clinic. So just opening it, or the concept of opening it, idea, represents an effort to change something about the kinds of services that people can access and to provide a social network of support that wasn't available there before. And in the process of setting it up, it includes a myriad of community-based arrangements to happen, including the very political activities involved in working with various agencies and individuals to gain their cooperation and make the clinic a reality. And when you're running a clinic, each individual that you see brings huge packages of personal social circumstances that we as nurses must take into account to achieve the goal of improving the health of the individual and community as a whole. So on the left is an illustration of a patient. So he comes with packages of personal social circumstances. The ball and chains represent the complexity of it. Things like family and cultural beliefs, economic concerns, unspoken fears about misconceptions, and lack of support. So these represent barriers. On the right, we are hoping that effective nursing approaches address all these underlying roots to reach the goal of maximum health and well-being. Nursing's patterns of knowing. So in 1978, Barbara Carper conducted a philosophical analysis of early nursing literature and identified 4 fundamental patterns of knowing in nursing. So this really opened the way for a broad, comprehensive, and holistic view of nursing knowledge. One is empirics, which is the science of nursing. Then you have ethics, component of moral knowledge in nursing, personal knowing, and aesthetics, which is the art of nursing. In 1995, scholars found another pattern of knowing that has long been a foundation for nursing. That's the socio-political knowing. In 2007, that then developed into the conceptualization of emancipatory knowing. It expanded to emphasize the nature of this pattern of knowing as expressed in nursing. So why emancipatory nursing? Why that term? Chin and Kramer mentioned in the book that they use that term to emphasize the driving force underpinning this pattern of knowing, the universal human longing for liberation from circumstances that limit full potential or that serve as barriers. Philosophical and theoretical foundations of emancipatory knowing in nursing. Emancipatory knowing and the approaches to practice that flow from this pattern of knowing are grounded in several fundamental assumptions. 1, that there's no historical value-neutral knowledge. 2, that research is a political activity. And yes, while a lot of my nursing friends always say they want to stay away from political stuff, nursing itself and research is a political activity in itself. Because even the act of forming research questions is grounded in human values, intentions, and vested interests. The choice of research focus and the results that flow from it shape from it shape human actions and interactions. Number 3, power relations inform knowledge development. Number 4, language is constructed to carry power meanings. Number 5, social oppressions are not natural or fixed. Those fundamental assumptions are shared by a number of philosophers and theories who are generally recognized for advocating a critical social perspective. So these are ideas of two significant philosophers that have formed the foundation for nursing's emancipatory critical perspective. First is Habermas. So his critical social philosophy was concerned with everyday life and practices that sustain us on a daily basis. So there are three human interests that are fundamental to everyday life. Number 1 is technical, and this involves a human interest and capacity to work with and create tools and systems that make it possible to carry our daily activities of living. Number 2 is practical, and this is concerned with communicative functions of life, like relationships and understandings. And number 3 is emancipatory. It involves a human capacity to recognize that something in the social milieu is wrong, unjust, or failing, and subsequently the human impulse to make things right. On the right, we have Frere's theory of human liberation. So this is about the idea about the oppressor and the oppressed, which is the powerless and divided. And these complementary characteristics of these groups exist not by individual will or intention, but rather because of systematic conditions inherent in the social structure that sustain injustice. So what's required for liberation? Number 1, consciousness raising. It's becoming aware of the situation and limitations. Consciousness of actions. And number 3, it's important to be fully and consciously grounded in love. So as they move towards liberation, these oppressed people, they don't become the oppressors themselves. And then there's a good example on page 151 about Jane the DNP, about that relates to Frere's theory of human liberation. Implications of the philosophy and theory for practice. So Joyce Fontana conducted an analysis of the foundation of critical emancipatory scholarship in nursing and identified 7 traits that characterize critical work in nursing. Number 1, critique. So much more than problem solving, critique requires an analysis that exposes the political and social structures that sustain patterns of injustice and imbalance. Number 2 is context. So emancipatory methods are fully situated in the circumstances of daily life. And example scenario with the Brazilian sugar cane workers. In this example in the book, instead of having them be subjects, they were participants. Frere started by showing them photos of their living conditions. Basically, the idea is that they were the oppressed, right? And discussed what was going on. They recognized dynamics of their situation on their own instead of what someone else told them to think or see. Politics. Critical science is based on the assumption that all research and human actions are political in the sense that they enact values in the world and, by doing so, affect the world and others who inhabit that world. 4. Emancipatory intent. This intent shapes an emancipatory approach from the outset. 5. Democratic structure. All who participate in emancipatory project are equal agents who collaborate and work together. 6. Dialectic analysis. Looks at the contradictory elements between ideal and reality. And number 7. Reflexivity. Group doesn't only look at what they're doing, but how they're doing. So emancipatory knowing and the essentials of advanced nursing practice. The first 7 of the essentials address competencies for advanced nurse practitioners in all specialties. Number 1, scientific underpinnings for practice. Number 2, organizational and systems leadership for quality improvement and systems thinking. So this is transformative leadership, taking a global, social, and political systems approach. Number 3, clinical scholarship and analytical methods for evidence-based practice. Clinical scholarship founded in an emancipatory approach brings together scholarship and practice in ways that are not possible with research approaches that lack this perspective. Number 4, information systems technology and patient care technology for the improvement and transformation of healthcare. Number 5, healthcare policy for advocacy in healthcare. So rather than imposing policy on groups of people, emancipatory approaches take the discussion to the people, and allies and advocates follow the will of the people. Number 6, interprofessional collaboration for improving patient and population health outcomes. So emancipatory approaches demand the involvement of all who are party to a situation. They must collaborate, incorporate to provide high quality care. Lastly, clinical prevention and population health for improving the nation's health. Because emancipatory thinking is an upstream approach, by definition, it leads to prevention and population health. All in all, challenges within the healthcare are created and sustained within social and political structures. Emancipatory perspectives provide a lens that may seem to make challenges more complex and more difficult, but this approach shifts to a more global, deeper probing of the issues and problems. It provides a means to better meet the needs of those who receive nursing care. So again, you're not only looking at the patient in front of you, but you're looking at everything else that surrounds that provides those barriers, and that overall improves patient health and the community that surrounds them. Check on learning. Which theory explains the complementary characteristics of the dominant, the oppressor, and disadvantaged oppressed groups? Is it Freire's theory of human liberation or Habermas' critical social philosophy? Answer is A. What is emancipatory knowing in your own words? These are some of the answers. And number 3, in your own words, why is research considered political? And like we mentioned earlier, research is a political activity because even the act of forming research questions is grounded in human values, intentions, and vested interests. The choice of research focus and the results that flow from it shape human actions and interactions. These are my references. If you have any questions, let me know. Thank you.